Well, for many businesses, new product development projects are really the primary drivers of revenue. The real challenge organizations face is their ability to look at all the ideas that are put forth before their teams and really objectively invest in the best ideas based on their ability to successfully execute on these projects. For many businesses that do not have a formal selection process in place, what happens is ideas bubble up to the top and take priority based either on political motives or on whoever has the loudest voice. The reality is less profitable projects or damaging ideas can really take precedence and may impact the overall success of these companies. The truth is, a formal selection strategy is really critical in that it aligns best practices with the overall corporate objectives of your organization, and it will ensure that the decisions for project selections are really made by the most qualified people that are going to be working on these specific projects. There are a number of factors to consider when building a selection strategy. Really, it's about the ability of capturing the information to make those informed decisions. The first thing to take into consideration is data integrity. From an information perspective, it needs to be consistent and accurate. In addition, the information used to validate product ideas needs to be consistent in the way it's captured so you can objectively measure the idea's future potential. Number two, you need to have clear targets. Businesses need to have the ability to identify clear targets that are aligned with their current business objectives and of course their stakeholder needs. Having a good understanding of the relationship between the various product ideas and the corporate goals that are already endorsed by the key executives and stakeholders that will be evaluating your pipeline, such as sales targets and resource alignment, will improve the chances of selecting profitable project ideas. Number three, you must look at the relevant success factors. New product development organizations need to develop metrics that will allow for more transparent evaluation when it comes to ranking and scoring of your ideas pipeline. The evaluating of a project idea should include also risk assessment and have other metrics such as ROI, strategic alignment, and priority ranking so that you have the necessary visibility into the potential ideas that are up for consideration. And finally, an important consideration will also be to have a systematized decision-making process. It's important to capture accurate information, but it's also important to develop a systematic approach to prioritizing, evaluating, and selecting your project ideas. An agreed upon decision-making framework with gates and a review process in place will allow for no stone to be left unturned and will also provide the necessary tools to deliver the appropriate go-kill strategy when you're managing your ideas pipeline. One of the biggest challenges in project selection can be analysis paralysis. It's not uncommon that in our information age, too much data can either create stalls or in many cases the complete halting of decisions where the presented information can get caught up with over-analysis or competing views that miss the big picture altogether. Especially in a marketplace that can shift directions quicker than ever, decisions need to be made quickly and efficiently so that companies can maintain their competitive edge. The fact is, the challenge is not capturing the data, but it is really about extracting the most relevant information that will improve your chances for success when you're looking and selecting that next big idea. There are a number of signs that contribute to the successful deployment of a project selection process. Here are some of the more important ones I feel are worth noting. Number one, an organization will see their ranking metrics aligned to both stakeholder needs and, of course, the demand of the marketplace. Number two, an organization's portfolio of project ideas will be balanced and prioritized by ranking ideas based on their relative importance. So there will be a priority that makes sense that's in place. Number three, management will have the necessary visibility into current resource utilization and talent so that they can accurately assess the ongoing viability of their pipeline. So they'll have a good sense of where their talent is and their ability to execute. Number four, fact-based metrics such as return on investment, internal rate of return, and net present value will be used to assist in the project selection process. And finally, number five, the selection of project ideas will take into account its impact on the current portfolio of active projects in your pipeline.
So before we get into the stages of product development, we need to understand where it falls in the marketing process. Basically, we don't begin to develop our product until we've come up with a conceptual product idea. So the idea of your product, how it's going to be used, who is it going to satisfy, so the profile of your target market, as well as who will be your competitors, who do you have to be aware of. Once you figure this out, then you move on to the product and the 4 P's of our marketing plan. So the first P is product. Whatchamacallit? Now this is a product and it fits within the marketing mix of the 4 P's. And a product can be a good or a service, even an idea, which consists of both tangible things you can touch and intangible attributes. Whether it is a product such as a good or a service or an idea, it's going to satisfy consumers in some way. It's going to satisfy their needs or their wants. And consumers will exchange money for your product or some other unit of value. And so product planning or product development are all about the decision making involved in creating this service, this good, this idea, the tangible and intangible aspects. So all the aspects of development that we need to recognize is what we will cover next in the stages of product development. So new products are created because consumers need or want them. There's a gap in the current market. The world doesn't have a product that exists that will satisfy those needs or those wants. Because of this gap, marketers and companies will develop products to satisfy this, that will fill this gap. So the question that every marketer needs to answer, why don't I just create and sell that product? If you can do it, then you will do it. And therefore, if a product is successful, it must have desirable attributes for the target market. It will be unique. And if it is not either of these things, it is doomed to fail. So once you've determined the fact that you need to create this product, you then are going to answer these questions. Can you produce it and can you sell it? This is something that we looked at with a feasibility study. It's something that we will refer to and revisit many times over in the next following lessons. So if the feasibility study finds that the idea is worth pursuing and that it is doable, the product development process begins. This process involves 8 stages, and every product needs to go through each of these 8 stages in order to then be brought to the market, in order to be sold to consumers. So the stages are as follows: idea generation, idea screening, concept development, market strategy, feasibility analysis or study, product design, test marketing, and market entry. You'll notice that feasibility analysis is actually not the first stage because many other stages precede that. However, it is always a good idea to always have in the back of your mind whether or not the product will be feasible. So the first stage is all about idea generation. What ideas do you have? What new products do you think could be successful? Will these new products be inventions or innovations? Whether or not they are inventions or innovations are because some point, someone generated these ideas. An idea to produce a product or service that is not currently available is this first stage. So the idea of a flying car, the idea of an iPad or a tablet device, the idea that you can play video games without using a controller. All of these amazing ideas started at this first stage. So the second stage is all about screening the idea. The very simple fact is that not all ideas are good ones. Case in point, New Coke. Research that if you want to find out more about that. Or McPizza. Another one, Heinz decided at one point that they wanted to make their ketchup green and blue and other colors. Not great ideas. Therefore, marketers need to test consumer reaction to their idea before they continue. Oftentimes, consumer reaction is positive and yet the product still fails. So it's not a definite answer to whether or not you should produce it, but it is something that you need to consider, and that the consumer reaction to your product is something you need to consider. So the idea is really just to throw around the idea, see what people think, get their feedback, make modifications, assess whether or not it's a good idea. The third stage is concept development. Again, not all ideas are good ones. However, if you've received positive feedback, then you need to move along and develop a prototype. Really, the idea here is that you've identified that the idea, the product, is a good one, that the market demand exists, and that competition will not prevent you from being successful. If you've answered yes to these questions, then you will develop a prototype, a sample. The stage will allow you to see the actual product, how it works, and the target market can then be brought in and really see how it works and provide feedback for improvements. The best example of concept development as far as products are automobiles. Every single car goes through this stage, and we see concept cars at auto shows. These concept cars are ideas. They've been screened, and they've created clay models that consumers can really check out and assess whether or not they like this car or not. Now it's time to move on to the market strategy. This is your marketing strategy. How are you going to address each of the 4 Ps? You will define each of these 4 Ps because you want to ultimately sell your product. You want to make sure that it addresses target market needs or wants. As well, you will identify who your primary target market is and your secondary target market, so you ensure you will reach those consumers. At the same time that you're developing your market strategy, you may or may not be developing your feasibility analysis. So once you've done your product design, once you've kind of addressed your 4 Ps, or at the same time, you then need to ask various questions. Do you have the materials and labor required to produce this product? Is the price of production going to be way too high? Do you have the distribution channels in place to get your product to the consumer? And what about promoting your product? How will you do this? It will be cost effective. Basically, again, you are answering this very simple question. Can you make and sell this product while making money doing so? Again, at the same time that you're doing your feasibility analysis and your market study, you're designing your product and continuously adding the consumer's feedback and the feasibility analysis questions and the answers to those questions into your product design. You're incorporating all this information. What will the product look like? The design will depend on what it does, as well as what the target market wants. So you can't just make a product that is just simply functional. It needs to satisfy the target market's want. And so once you've addressed your 4 Ps, you've continuously revisit the feasibility analysis, and you've continuously addressed the product design, it's now to go to test marketing. You need to test the acceptance of the product. Do consumers like it? Will they accept it? May they buy it down the road? This occurs by offering the product to a random sample of your target market. This is something that we look back at in marketing research. The consumer feedback in these test markets will improve your venture, improve your product, and determine whether the product should officially go to market. And if the test marketing is successful, it now moves on to market entry. This is where the product officially enters the market. It's sold to everyone. The product life cycle now begins, and we'll go through those product life cycle stages in the following videos. But the life of this product will be determined by the consumers, by competition, and further product advances. And so no matter what you've done up until this point, there's a lot of unknowns that will influence your products, and you need to be aware of these. Okay, so the product development process. Following these simple steps, 8 steps, you will hopefully, not guarantee, but hopefully improve your chances for successful products. You will hopefully gather profit from this. You will hopefully compete with the existing competitors. This process, however, needs to constantly be revisited. You need to constantly improve your products, update your products, stay ahead of your competitors, and so most companies will continuously revisit this product development process. So this brings us to our end. What makes a successful product? Think about the 8 stages. What do you think will determine whether or not a product will be successful? What activities are involved with idea screening? Is it a simple matter of, do you like it or not? So think about these questions. Make sure your notes are in order. Make sure you summarize them, and you've provided some discussion questions. And that's it. That's all. That's everything. So before we can connect it to product, we need to look at the product development process again and refresh this. So idea generation is the first step of this product development process. We then move into idea screening, concept development, market strategy, and then we perform a feasibility study. We refresh and modify the product and do the product design. We test market it, and then we enter the market. So today we are going to take a look at idea screening, because at this stage, this is where we need to take into consideration what consumers want, as well as what the competitive environment is like. So if we must consider both the consumer and competition, how do we consider this? How do we get this information? Now, we've looked at marketing research, and so this is going to lightly touch on that idea of marketing research, but this is the functions that need to be performed during product development. So to do this, to properly study the consumers and competition's place in the development process, so we need to consider what's going on out there in the market. We will use product mapping, marketing opportunity analysis, and benefit analysis. So the first tool is the product mapping. This identifies what's already out there in the market. It identifies what consumers like and dislike about existing products. It identifies what is missing from the market. So think about idea screening. In order to screen your idea, you really need to consider what's out there. You need to consider what consumers like and dislike. So to do this product mapping exercise, you need to group products according to a category and fill in those groups. For example, for confectionery items, it might be sweet versus salty. For cars, it might be expensive versus cheap. For foods, it might be healthy versus unhealthy. For activities, boring versus fun. For any product, it might be high quality versus low quality. So let's take a look. So when you product map a category, it's all about placing products on an axis. For example, expensive versus inexpensive cars. From Kia to Ferrari, you place various car products on this axis. For unhealthy versus healthy snack foods, again, you place products on the axes. So it could be specific brands, it might be specific types of products. It might also be that you need to place these products on two axes, from high quality to low quality, from high price to low price. And you have various chocolate bar brands that are found. So products can be high quality and high price, or low quality and low price. It would be rare to have a low quality product with a high price. That would indicate a not very well thought out marketing strategy. Market opportunity analysis, or MOA, identifies the various opportunities or market situations for a specific brand. This is known as a situational analysis. It attempts to identify where a void exists so that companies and products can fill that void and hopefully earn quite a lot of money. There are three parts to this. Part 1 is the overall market, Part 2 is indirect competition, and Part 3 is the direct competition. So let's take a look. So the first part is to identify the overall market. So you start by identifying a category, a very broad category. For example, if you are going to create a new chocolate bar, you would identify a very broad category such as snack foods. You would then identify all the products that make up that market. From chips to chocolate to popcorn to peanuts to crackers to vegetables to granola bars, all these are very general terms used for snack foods. And so since you are a chocolate bar manufacturer and you hope to sell your product, a chocolate bar, on the market, you first have to identify this overall market that you'll compete with. So the next step is to identify all the indirect competitors. Again, snack foods, there are many different types of snack foods, from chips to chocolate bars to granola bars. The next step is to identify each brand that exists within those various types of snack foods. For example, chocolate bars are likely competition for chips, but they are different. So therefore, you'll need to identify all the different brands of chips, and all the different brands of chocolate bars, and all the different brands of granola bars, and popcorn, and various other snack foods that exist. So this is where you're classifying the various competitive brands. By doing this, you're going to see if there are market opportunities that exist. Does granola bars only have one or two brands? Does chocolate bars only have a couple? Does chips have a ton, and therefore you're going to avoid that type of snack food? This will illustrate the gaps that exist out there. And lastly, part 3 is really about breaking it down to very specific features. These are your direct competitors. In this step, you're going to identify all the products that directly compete. So these products have the same features. Again, if I'm going to create a chocolate bar that has caramel inside of it, I need to identify all those chocolate bars that have that very same feature. Are there any gaps in this chocolate bar category? Is there room for me to create another product and sell it in that category? By completing this step, you will identify whether or not there is a gap, and therefore should you or should you not sell that product. As well, in this step, you need to identify the market potential. How many potential buyers are out there? What's the average price of products that are out there? And how many products are purchased on average per year? This is a very simple equation. The market potential, MP, is calculated by the N, number of possible buyers, the P, purchase price, and Q, average number of purchases per year. So example is that 50 million Canadians buy chocolate bars 10 times per year, and the average price of a chocolate bar is $1. Therefore, the market potential for chocolate bars in Canada would be $150 million. At this point in time, you can identify whether or not it's a sizable enough market to enter, or maybe not. Remember, it's all about how much profit can be gained. If there's not enough profit to be gained, there's no point entering that market. Unless, of course, you're offering a service that is not for profit. That would be different. And lastly is the benefit analysis. Now, this really pertains to the consumers. It pertains to consumers because it's about identifying what features they truly value, how much they're willing to pay for these features. In this case, it's all about the utility, and hence why we looked at utility prior to this video. The data that we use and gather in this step and using this tool, we can then use in a cost-benefit analysis. Maybe it's going to cost a lot to add caramel to our chocolate bar, and consumers are not willing to pay extra for that. Therefore, it would not be worthwhile to create this product. Not every feature adds value in the minds of consumers, and therefore you really need to look at whether or not it's worth it to add those features to your product. And by performing a benefit analysis, you will be able to. So this brings us to our end of the video, and again, this is all about idea screening and what tools we can use to really screen our idea. So it's not just about throwing the idea out there to a couple of friends, it's about really doing some serious fact checking and analysis. So what types of information can be obtained from product mapping? How would marketers know by using an MOA to develop a chocolate bar with caramel in it if there were caramel-filled chocolate bars already on the market? By answering these questions, you'll be able to truly understand these tools and this stage idea screening of the product development process. So make sure your notes are in order, you've summarized them, and you've added your own discussion questions. And that's it, that's all. So as mentioned, we've finished marketing research. We've identified all the different ways and methods and tools that we can use to gather information. All this information is consumer information that we can apply to creating products. What the consumers are telling us are what types of features, what types of qualities, what kinds of flavors, and etc., that we want to apply to our products. And once we've gathered this information, we can then begin our product development. So the first P of our marketing mix. To develop a product, we need to make sure that we address consumers' needs and wants. This is the first step of starting a business venture. There's no point in starting a business if the consumers don't want or need what you are producing. This product development stage can be very frequent or infrequent. It depends on the business. Some businesses, once they create a product and develop a product, that's it. That's all they have to do, and they sit back and they watch as the cash flows in. Other businesses need to continuously develop products because they have many different types of products they're selling, and they need to improve upon these products. So this can be a very frequent activity. The marketing team needs to cooperate with the production team. So no matter if you're doing this once or you're doing this frequently, you need to be cooperating with the production team because they can help you in identifying whether or not you can build the product or service that you wish to build. So this is a very complex and constant process, something that you need to factor. This idea of a complex and constant process for product development is something that is addressed through a feasibility study. So before you even begin producing a product, inventing it, or innovating it, you need to ask yourselves two very important questions. Can you produce it? And can you sell it? The can you produce it question is something that the production team needs to address. You could have the greatest idea in the world as a marketer. You could say that this product is going to satisfy every single consumer's needs and wants. But if it can't be produced, then it doesn't matter. And so the production team is going to be able to tell you whether or not you have the materials available, whether or not you have the technology available, whether or not it's going to cost X amount of dollars because of this tools and technology and materials that you need. The can you sell it question is something that you as a marketer need to address. How are you going to sell it? What kind of promotional activities are you going to do? What price point are you going to sell it at? Right? All of these factors need to be considered before you even begin to produce your product. And so this is what a feasibility study does. It determines if there's any business opportunity that you can proceed upon, whether or not the business opportunity is possible, whether or not it's practical, whether or not it's viable, right? These are important questions that you need to ask yourself. You need to consider the price, the materials, available technology, the promotion, the sales, consumer preferences, competitive environment, all of these things. And again, if you can produce it, but it's going to cost you $100 per unit, and yet you know that consumers are only willing to spend $5 per unit, then you can't sell it. And vice versa. If you know you can sell it, but there's no materials available to you, therefore you can't produce it, then again, you can't proceed. And so the feasibility study is the first thing you really need to address before you begin inventing or innovating products. And so now we need to look at invention versus innovation. What is the difference between these two? Invention are new devices. These are new devices, methods, processes, anything that is new for your business. It's developed through study and experimentation. There are many companies that pride themselves on inventing new products. Apple, for instance. 3M is another one. The idea of the sticky note, that was an invention that has reaped them huge dividends. Innovation is an improvement upon a technology, a product, a process. So the product already exists. However, innovation, when it's applied to these existing products, means that it improves upon these. And so the methods used to produce these products might be new, or the ways to distribute them might be new. So innovation versus invention. One is brand new, one is new and improved. Inventions are something that, for some reason, we always think of these as historical products, right? There's less and less new inventions out there. There's less and less new products out there. We often see much more innovative products, so improvements upon existing products. Inventions are something that we can look back through time and look at and say, you know, that was remarkable. That was something brand new. And these were created by inventors, these risk takers, forward thinkers, goal setters, focused, determined, and committed, and always asking questions type of people. If you take a look at those products, all of these are inventions. The telephone, the bowling ball, or the game of bowling itself, the canned arm, the basketball net, the hockey mask. See if you can determine who invented these products. I think you might find this kind of remarkable as far as who determined these products. Innovation happens through innovators. People who challenge the status quo. They're curious. They're self-motivated. They're visionaries. They entertain the unbelievable. They take risks. They are self-accepting in their own abilities, and yet they're flexible and adaptive. Now, you will find that innovators and inventors are very, very similar. However, innovators have slightly more skill in certain things where they can take a look at an existing product and see how it can be improved upon. So innovations happen every single day. We see much more innovations happening today than we see new inventions. The goalie mask has changed, television, phone, basketball shoes themselves. All of these have been innovated upon, right? And so innovators are very, very vital to a business because they can take a look at existing processes, practices, methods, products themselves and services and say, you know what, this can be improved. And they will put themselves to the task of improving those products.
So what would a great product development process look like? I can think of 5 key characteristics that I think it should have. So I think it should be agile. I think it should be lean. I think it should be compliant. I think it should be absolutely focused on delivering business value. And I think it should be risk-driven. So firstly, I think it should be agile. I think for product development, particularly for products that take a long time to develop, you must recognize that change is going to happen. Change is going to happen in both the market needs, the requirements that the product needs to meet, but also the environment around us. There'll be something that happens that changes what we're trying to deliver into. And you need to not deny that change. You need to embrace it, accept it, build it into the way that you develop products. And that's what I mean by being agile. Secondly, I think we need to have a product development process that's lean. And I think quite simplistically about lean. I don't mean all of the fantastic Six Sigma stuff and lean manufacturing and things like that. I think specifically about avoiding waste. So what I want is a product development process that doesn't invest time and effort in things that aren't going to return value. I don't know what that means in practice, but the way that we employ a similar principle here is we don't try and tackle the low value functions of our product right up at the front. We try and wait until we've got evidence that the whole product, the critical functions, are likely to work. And the third element is about being compliant. And almost this is just a cost of doing business. Whatever product we make is to be delivered into a market which will have a series of regulations, whether they be WE, CE marking, 510K, PMA, whatever it is, they need to meet those regulations. So the product development process that we use to develop those products must be compliant. Fourthly, it's got to be absolutely business driven. I think the decoupling from a marketing function to an R&D function to manufacturing to sales is harming the likelihood of a product being developed successfully. Personally, I am more likely to deliver you a product that meets your business case, your business need, if I understand that business case and business need. And as we go through the journey of developing the product, we're constantly re-evaluating and readjusting to recognize the business need and then change accordingly. And fifthly, I think we need a product development process that is risk-driven, that recognizes that the complexity of products is going to increase. They're going to become much harder to even define and control and manage and build. And therefore, we need to recognize that risk is there and needs to be built into the process, that we understand that risk and try to build mitigation against it.
I think it's interesting to look at new technologies and understand their impact on the product development process. I think generally people look at new technologies and they tend to move towards the products and think how those technologies will impact on products and the new products that the technologies will enable. But I think it's interesting to see how those technologies will impact on the process of product development. One area that might, of course, be interesting is we've seen the whole evolution of IT and how that has supported multiple designers and developers working on the same product in parallel. I would see that would continue to expand so that we've got a much more dynamic design and develop environment. People have looked at the whole open innovation process and whether there's learnings from there that can feed into the development process, which again can increase creativity as long as it's constrained and controlled within the design process. So that might be an interesting area. I think there's a lot on modelling, prediction, simulation, and that will allow us to predict the performance of the design and remove some of the long design and test cycles that we've had in the past. So we've got much more predictability of performance, much more predictability of lifetime. And I think the other thing that will change is that the available information that gets fed back to designers will improve. So they'll have a much better view of the life cycle of the product they have developed so that they can learn how the designs they've developed have impacted on complexity in manufacturing, have impacted on performance with customers, have impacted on returns for customers, so they can learn and feed that back into increased knowledge and experience in the whole design and development process. So I think there's a whole lot around the way that we use IT and structuring IT. I think the other next area might be looking at new materials and new manufacturing processes. So these will enable us to fabricate components which will become increasingly more representative of final parts earlier and earlier throughout the product development process, and again allow us to try to accelerate that whole process. I think those processes and those materials will also lead to new manufacturing processes which might be more amenable to supporting the development process. So we've already seen things like metal injection moulding as different ways of fabricating and processing components with functionality that we would normally have chosen other fabrication processes for and other materials for. I think the other thing that becomes increasingly interesting is as we integrate different technologies, we'll see a miniaturization of products. And rather than conventional machining, discrete components and assembly, we'll see a lot of bottom-up growth of components. And there we're into a new domain and a new set of skills for fabricating micro products, which will include electronics, but also mechanical functionality and additional functionality that we want from the product. So the whole design environment will change. And if you extrapolate further from that, you'll also think that the whole design rules will change. So rather than designing products around a discrete set of parts which you can then model and sign the design off against, you're now looking at a situation where the manufacturing process is an intrinsic part of the design of the product. And that will give us challenges as to how someone can sign a design off when he's not actually looking at an assembly of a discrete set of parts. He's looking at a combination of parts plus process, and therefore we'll need to develop a whole new set of design rules and predictive rules that will allow us to sign off those designs. And again, that will have a huge impact on the way that we design and develop products. And it will also mean that we need to start looking at the disciplines that we develop and teach our product developers for the future, because perhaps the existing constraints of different disciplines will also change, and we'll need people with experience of a number of different disciplines to then contribute to a multidisciplinary product development.
The global recession that's happening at the moment, and the zombie economy that leaves behind, that leaves companies with a liquidity problem, that they'll struggle to invest in new product development. And of course that means that the success of any individual product becomes that much more important. Then the technology and the expectations that the customers have on technology is going to increase and increase and increase. People are going to expect much more sophisticated products, much more reliable, information-savvy products. And that means that the product development process is going to have to be able to cope with that level of complication and complexity in order to deliver what the market needs.
We could look at the whole sustainability angle, where there will be an increasing requirement to look and manage the whole material supply chain. So we may not be starting with virgin materials anymore. We might be using recycled materials, and maybe their physical characteristics are slightly different, so we need to understand that better, all the way through to the end of life of those products. So how are we going to dismantle and recycle components at the end? So that will cause a change in the philosophy of design, from the design principles and design sign-off through to the structure of products and how they're designed and assembled so that they can be dismantled and recycled. Another one might be our increasing awareness of energy and energy costs, whether that has implications on the manufacturing processes that you'll use to manufacture products, and that may change a slightly different dynamic there. It may change the raw materials that we have available to us, because increasingly we'll move towards the highest value use of raw materials, and it may or may not be available for product development. And I think energy will also have a big impact on the whole logistics and supply chain. So do we continue to manufacture remotely and spend a lot of money on logistics and supply, or do we think about moving back to more localized manufacture? And if you do, what manufacturing process will then be more appropriate for the manufacture of those sorts of products? We've seen the migration of a lot of manufacturing activity to the Far East. We're seeing increasing migration of design and development to the Far East. We've seen the West continuing to want to own the innovation and the innovation and the customer. So at some point we'll maybe have a slightly different break in the product development process between the customer, between design, between development, between manufacture. And depending on where that division is, you'll have different tools, different capabilities, different resources to execute the whole development process. Well, I think these drivers have been evident for a number of years. So actually, when you look at the way that we undertake our developments, then I think that has been changing in any case to start reflecting those trends. So I think, for example, we've moved a lot further back into the innovation space, and are very adept at identifying new opportunities for our clients, identifying and insourcing appropriate technologies to realise those opportunities. I think we're increasingly getting much better relationships with a range of downstream manufacturers, so then we can start offering an end-to-end product development and implementation cycle. We've started moving into low volume manufacture ourselves for some products that are intrinsically quite complex, and where you might want to retain that complexity as know-how in-house. I think the other thing that's quite interesting is that a lot of the drivers that we mentioned previously have meant that some sectors are beginning to grow in importance. And if you look at the sectors that we're now active in, you'll see that the products and manufacturing processes that we're continuing to develop now start moving into the whole energy domain, into the clean tech domain, and into the fundamental sciences and technologies that underpin some of those sectors. So a lot of material processing, a lot of material characteristics, trying to achieve functionality with lower amounts of materials. There's a lot been said about the micro and nanotechnology explosion, and we've been looking at selective areas in those areas where we can take some of those technologies and realise product, both in terms of reducing the whole environmental footprint of those products, but also recognising that they are enabling some of those emerging sectors to address some of the problems they're facing.
So we want to create an understanding of what the best way of going from a market need to a delivered product rolling off manufacturing lines that is going to be successful, that's more likely to deliver success. So to make sure that the product development, as it goes through its processes, is constantly reevaluated and is aligned with their business need.